No, Pat, man, thank you for taking the time to join the Books for Guys podcast today. As I'm extremely excited to talk with you, just because your background is very interesting. I was looking at a lot of it with NASA and planes and doing a lot of cool things, and then I was like, okay, I can see where this translates into some of Pat's fiction writing and just where
Yeah.
some of your interests are. And so, man, it is good to have you on today.
Good to be here. I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you being a part of it and being able to have this discussion with you. But Pat, I know a little bit about you, but I would love for you to share just in your own words, just your story and just your career and how that progressed into your interest of writing this book series that you have out now. And I was gonna say right now, I've got one of your books on the website, and I've got to get the whole series on there. So by the time this is actually released, everybody will be able to go on the website and see the
Excellent.
full series. But no, Pat, I would love for you to tell about. I kind of mentioned, NASA and a lot of your professional work. I would love for you just to share your professional journey, and then just again how that's led into now becoming a published author.
Sure. Grew up in Seattle, and then left Seattle at 17 to go to the Air Force Academy. Finished that, became an Air Force pilot. Did that. Eventually went through Air Force test pilot school. Flew as test pilot for a bunch of years, and then the Air Force was going to make me sit behind a desk for the rest of my career. And I said, no, I think I got a better idea. So I went to work for a large American airline based out of Dallas, Fort Worth.
We can guess who that is.
Yeah. A year later, they furloughed me. And I thought, how can they furlough me? I'm good. I'm good. Didn't matter. Mattered what day I got hired. So I got furloughed, and I took that as a kind of a divine career pivot. So I started looking around for work, got picked up by Honeywell, eventually ended up running their defense and space electronic systems down at Johnson Space Center. So worked with NASA on a bunch of projects, the Space Shuttle space station, a thing called the X-38, which was supposed to be the lifeboat for the station. And then right as Artemis got kicked off as a project, I was talking to some friends of mine, and they said, we're doing a lot of consulting outside of regular work. Maybe we ought to start our own business. So we did. And I started that company 15 years later, sold my interest in that company. Along the way, I started a couple other businesses. And now I've kind of throttled everything back to where all I really do is I do consulting for high-tech aviation projects like hydrogen-powered and electrical-powered airplanes, and then I write. So, finally the love of my childhood reading has translated into writing for people that I hope love to read it as much as I love to write it.
Yeah. No, that's really cool, Pat. And I'm curious to know. So I actually had someone else on who was a part of the Air Force a few episodes back, and I know a couple of friends personally who went through the academy and went to play sports there, which was really cool. But I know how prestigious and hard it is to get selected to go into the Air Force. Did you grow up always with an interest in planes, or where did that, I guess, passion get sparked from?
Well, it really started with science fiction because I read all the classics, Asimov, Clarke, Heinlein, and that made me decide I wanted to become an astronaut. So I did a little research and determined that all the astronauts at the time had started as test pilots. So I go, okay, I need to start as a test pilot. Who has airplanes? The Air Force has airplanes. So I started thinking, okay, I'm going to join the Air Force, be an Air Force test pilot, end up being an astronaut. Well, 2 out of 3 wasn't bad, but, it didn't quite make it into the cockpit of a spacecraft, but that didn't kill my passion for it at all.
Yeah. Well, and I can hear just your passion in just where your interests lie. And I can see where being behind a desk is just not something that would suit you and make you very happy for very long. So it's funny how you can pick that up. But no, that's incredible. I'm sure you've gotten to experience. And to me, I'm not very conceptually in tune with how planes and hydraulic and how they're structured. I don't have that engineering technological mindset, but I think it's so fascinating how these things are built and work. And obviously, just recently with the space shuttle going and coming back within the last week was a big deal that I was
Yeah.
following. And I'm sure you were too. So actually, great timing for this conversation. It kind
Yeah.
of correlates there, but so Pat, you said you grew up reading a lot too, which is pretty cool because I would say 75% of my guests and probably 100% of my friends did not grow up loving reading or writing. And it's kind of just where Books for Guys was born out of. Honestly, was just trying to encourage more reading at an earlier age, just so you can get that curiosity journey started sooner. Because I learned how important reading was really later in life. I mean, I always knew it was important, but I didn't really start like loving it personally until post college. And I was like, man, if I'd have had the same passion as a kid, like just how much further along I could be, and just the knowledge I'd have. And so I think it's really cool that you had that passion at an early age. I guess my question for you is, where did that come from? Were your parents readers? Did you have, within school and teachers, like how did you learn to enjoy reading at such an early age?
Yeah, that's interesting to hear that from you, your perspective with your guests, your own background. My parents were always avid readers. My mom loved historical fiction, and my dad loved detective stories. You know,
Okay.
so Mickey Spillane, all that kind of stuff. So part of my childhood that I don't remember but take for granted is that every day when I was a wee lad, one or both of my parents read to me. And they read kids' books. And then, so by the time I got in elementary school, I was kind of reading on my own. And then in junior high school, one of the electives I could take was this thing called Individualized Reading Center. And I thought, wait a minute, I get credit
To
for
read.
sitting there and reading whatever I want for an hour. I go, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, both my parents read to me. My sister and I were and are still avid readers. It, it gradually became part of my everyday routine. And as I got busier with work and stuff, didn't read as much during the day, but every night before I turn off the bed, I'm reading for like 30 minutes, sometimes more, depending on what I'm reading and how gripping it is. So yeah, started early.
I can assume too with the work that you've done professionally that fiction, even science fiction that kind of correlates and you kind of get creative with it, creates a sort of outlet for you to kind of turn things off from the professional space a little bit and kind of get lost. And I think I've found the importance of reading more and more fiction over the last couple of years, and I've really challenged myself to do that because I don't know, in this crazy world, there's so much information and knowledge, and my brain feels fried. But I can get lost in a fiction book, and it just I don't know, it's just relaxing, gives you story. It's entertainment without scrolling and watching a screen, and so I just find I'm starting to just preach that more and more to people, like, "Hey, pick up a I know personal development's great, and you wanna be great at business and all this stuff, but, like, a good fiction book can really balance that out a lot." But I really wanna dive into your books, Pat. So you have is it 4 or 5 books now in the series?
There's 4 books in the series, and
Okay.
I'm calling the series done for now.
Yeah.
4 books in the series.
Yeah, cool. And how did you talk about your process of putting it together? When you first started, was the plan for it to be a series, or as you started writing, did it genuinely become a series?
I always planned it to be a standalone book, just one. And as I was writing it and then doing revisions and redoing the ending, it wasn't until I wrote the last paragraph of the book that I realized, oh, there is way more to this story than I could tell. So then it became a series from that point on.
Yeah, that's cool. And so, but you're saying for now, you've kind of completed this particular series as far as you plan.
Yeah, yeah, I might go back to it later to do some offshoot stuff. But one of the things about writing is you end up with these ideas and they start fighting for headspace. And eventually you gotta let one out. And so I knew I needed to put the whole Spark Chronicles aside because I had some other ideas that really were demanding my time.
Yeah.
I wrapped up that series and then started on my next fiction book and my next nonfiction. And I think they're both going to be standalone. We'll see.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, and I wanna get to some of the work you're working on, but talk about the Spark series a little bit, just without giving too much away, because I want everyone to read the series. What was the idea, I guess the general, framing of your book and some of the storyline to it? Just kinda give a high level overview of it.
Sure, sure. It came about. You ever played the game Pokemon Go?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I have two daughters, and they were both playing Pokemon Go. And like any father, I think you need to know what your kids are into.
Yeah.
And so I downloaded it, I started playing it, and I'm multitask. So I'm playing it while I'm walking my dog in the morning.
Trying to
So I'm
catch
out in the
everything up.
dark, the pre-dawn darkness, and I'm scrolling along and I'm trying to catch the Pidgeys that are popping. And I had one of those stop in the middle of the street with an idea moments. I thought, what if, what was enthralling to me about Pokemon Go was you used your camera's phone to capture the real world. And then it superimposes a virtual fictional character on that real background. And I thought, wow, this would be so cool if you could turn it into a Disney-sized theme park. And, I'm also a gamer. And so I thought, wow, this would be a great way to do quests. And you could have anchor quests and side quests and all your restaurants could be themed. And so I started thinking about that more and more. And then that led me to think about the technology, and then the technology kind of fed into the story itself. And that's what really got me launched on the first book.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. How does it I was talking with someone about this the other day, and I think you'll understand this just from the style of your book. I think a long time ago, I had a really challenging I guess my interest was challenged because it was hard for me to understand science fiction. I wasn't necessarily super intrigued by it or interested because I just really didn't understand how it worked. As I was saying, like, I don't even know how my own car works. I just want it to work. But I think now with all of the technology of AI and just phones and TVs and Bluetooth, like, I can see things working, and it's led me to be more interested in science fiction and fantasy because it's almost like I can almost touch it. Like, I can see where some of this is headed, and it's coming very fast. How do you, I guess, like, blending your professional career and your passion for this, technology and fantasy and stuff, how I guess I'm sure it was a real joy putting this together because you think in these terms too, and I'm sure you can even see the vision clearer than I can because you understand better how this technology works. But just how was it for you implementing, I guess, just what was the process of it all, and how did you put pen to paper and organize this? Because, this is your first book series.
Yeah.
Just how did you go about I guess I was just curious to know your process behind it.
Okay. Well, I started with an outline, and the first book had an outline that was maybe a page long. And then I kept that as the bottom of the document, and I just started telling the story. And somewhere along the line, somebody gave me the advice, or I heard it on a podcast, that you should write fast, bad, and wrong. And the point behind that is don't be afraid of gooning stuff up at first.
You can edit
Just
later.
get the story out and get the bones set up. And then when you do revisions, you can go back later and clean all that up. And so I did that. And one of the things that stopped me along the way is I'd start writing about some technology or some technical aspect. I'd stop myself and no, that's BS. That's not going to work like that. So I'd have to go do a little research because I know a lot about aviation,
Yeah.
but I knew really fairly little about solar power and about AI, both of which play big roles in my book. So I ended up doing a lot of research on those things. Then and then with feeling a little more comfortable as I wrote about them, that helped me a lot. So I wrote and wrote and wrote, and the biggest thing, it's like getting in shape. The most important part of your physical fitness program is getting to the gym. That's the hardest part. Because once you get to the gym, that's like, all right, I'll work out. So it's like actually sitting down and setting off aside some time to write, go, okay, I'm going to do nothing else in this 2 hour block but write. I will give myself permission to do nothing but sit and think, but I can't do anything else. I can't pick up my PS5 controller. I can't scroll, nothing but writing or thinking about it. So I had to have a little discipline to do that.
Yeah. No, and I love hearing about people's processes just because everyone's so different. Some people have families and careers and you're balancing two acts. I'm always curious, like, hey, do you write in the mornings? Like, do you take notes while you're driving, picking your kids up from school? And other people, they have all the time in the world and they're like, oh, I'll do it, an hour here. Really strict deadlines on themselves. Hey, I'm going to write 4,000 words today. I'm going to complete 5 pages. So I just love knowing people's processes and just the back end work. Cause I know it's so much work. I know, you put this finished product out there and I'll talk about this too. You see the finished product go, oh, that's great. You're a great writer. You did this cool, but they don't see the process behind it all and how much effort and time and discipline it takes. Especially for someone who it's not just one book for you. You've got four. It's a lot of work and progression. Did you find yourself from book one to book four? I'm always curious about this too, because I talk with some writers about this and how different your writing can change just based off simple things of what's going on in your life, what's going on in technology, what's, new ideas being sparked, playing Pokemon Go and seeing the way that works. What were some of the things you experienced, I guess, from book one to book four that maybe changed your style of writing? Or were there things that you can tell, like, this is different than book one because of what's going on in the world right now, or something like that?
Yeah, I do pick up some topical things, what's going on in the world. When I was a kid growing up, the bad guy was always the Russians.
Yeah.
And that's changed now. Now the bad guy is either terrorists or it's China, depending on your perspective or what day it is. So yeah, I think my writing has gotten better. I'm more conscious about breaking some of the bad habits I had early on. For example, we use the same words and the same phrases a lot in our everyday conversation. Well, you start reading a book like that and seeing it on every other page, it starts getting a little tedious. So thank God for my editors early on. They pointed it out. And so in revisions, I'd go back and I change it, better way to phrase it. What's the right word to use here? And then as I've written, my outlines have gotten a lot longer. Now a beginning outline for a book is 4 to 6 pages. And I still keep it at the bottom of the document so I can scroll back down and go, oh, I forgot all about that. And then go back and do a little rewrite, or, yeah, it's not going to work anymore because the characters have pivoted. So, yeah. So I try to keep pace with what's going on in the science and technology world, make sure that I don't come off as a complete buffoon.
Yeah. No, I don't. I've seen some crazy, work out there where I'm like, I can't understand this. No, so Pat, you said you're working on some new work now. You've got this one, put there. It's always probably going to be your baby as your first series. But you said you're working on both a fiction and nonfiction project, which is actually going to be one of my questions for you before I jumped on here. Was just I guess let's start here. And I know
Okay.
I'm all over the place on this, but do you read both fiction and nonfiction books, or do you steer one way or the other typically?
Yep. I would say probably 60% of my reading is fiction and the other 40% is nonfiction because, hey, like you talked about early on, I want to be better. I want to be smarter. I want to figure out how to do things better or understand things better. I mean, you go to the store, you see a million supplements, and it's like, what do I need? Does it any of it really matter? So you start maybe following some people that talk about it or reading some books like Lifespan that really gets into it. And then there's other things that I'd never thought really much about. Darwin's Black Box that a buddy of mine recommended, and then a book called Just Six Numbers that I just finished. So that kind of feeds my nonfiction. And then sometimes I'll also read stuff that's a military history because it's intriguing to me that the history of the Korean War, as I learned it going through the Air Force Academy, and as it's now known, is vastly different, particularly in terms of the air war, just because China and Russia have opened up their records. And so now we have what their historians said, and we can meld all this together and go, whoa, we weren't just the Supermen we thought we were. There was a little more going on there. So I think I've wandered away from what your actual question was.
No, no, I love that because I find that stuff interesting too. And that's what's funny about these conversations. Sometimes my brain goes 10 different directions just as I'm thinking of, again, like I love your background because you're not just someone who you became a writer and you've written stories or not like you have this whole professional career that's kind of blended into your interest in writing. So I love learning about both sides of that. So your nonfiction work, is it is it a memoir type of book? Is it about a specific subject that you've learned and I guess used throughout your professional career? Or what way are you going with that one?
Yeah, this one's a little different and very interesting to me. A guy that was a CEO of an oil and gas company learned about Spark, the first book in the series, and then learned that I'd written more. While he was CEO of this company, a significant event occurred at the company. And I'm not going to go into too much because I don't want to spoil the book, but he has since retired and he approached me. He said, "Hey, do you want to write my story?" I said, "Well, it's your story. We could write on it together." So we've been working on that. And it's not so much the mechanics of what got them there to the event that happened, but it's how it played out and how he fought his way for his company out of this really dark forest and brought them back, and ended up having to, the whole thing was messy. He ended up having to testify before Congress. And so anyway, now I'm working with him on the nonfiction book.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
a
So
biography in a way.
yeah, but I think it's really going to be more a business book.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Jack Welch wrote The GE Way, and it's a little bit about Jack Welch, but it's really more about the business itself. And this is about how you build a business to be resilient and to recover from something bad.
Yeah. How different are these projects for you, and which one do you think, and this may be hard to project, but I'm curious to know which one you may go down, like what path you may go down with fiction and nonfiction. I was actually talking to another author who's done both, and he was talking about the differences of, when you write fiction, it can be sometimes lonely because it's just you, your thoughts, you're trying to put this together. But with nonfiction, you're seeking out people, you're having conversations, you're learning different things, you're having to go knock on doors and have these, again, conversations where it's not just you. What process, I guess, have you enjoyed more so far? Is it this new nonfiction story where you're having to have those conversations, or is it equal? I know they're so different.
It's just different. And that's probably the best way to put it, because you're right. Writing fiction by yourself can be kind of lonely. It's just you. The big difference is, though, when you're writing a book on your own, there's only one opinion. And when you're writing a book with somebody else, they have an opinion. Like, what the heck? How dare you have an opinion about your own story? It's it's
Not what I want to write.
yeah. So that's a growth opportunity. Get to see my work in somebody else's eyes in almost real time, because we're bouncing pages back and forth. No, I don't really want it to be like this. And well, I think you need it to be, you need to make it a little more personal so people get more engaged. So those kind of conversations have been fun, and conversations never have writing fiction. So it's different, it's interesting, and it's given me a whole different kind of research that I'm doing now. I'm looking into the public record more, and honestly, that's the great thing about the public record, is that someone else has written it and stands behind it. And so when you use that as source material, you've got a little bit of protection there. If you're writing it completely from your memories, then there's always what if I didn't remember right? I mean, heck, sometimes there's days I don't remember what I had for breakfast. So something that happened 5 years ago,
Yeah.
tougher.
It's cool how this opportunity kinda came to you organically, because maybe it's something that if without that individual approaching you about it, maybe you don't go down this route and write a nonfiction book. Maybe you stay with fiction. But I love that it's the challenge of doing this and how the opportunity presented itself, and you're taking it on. Like, all right, let's do this. Let's jump in and go this route that maybe you weren't considering before. So I always find that fascinating too, just the opportunities and how they present themselves. It's so cool how that happens, and you just got to be the one to say yes and take it. So, Pat, I've got really just one more question for you. This is such a great conversation. I love learning all about just what you're doing and just the approaches to it. I think it's so cool. But one question I ask everybody who comes on the podcast, because again, I'm always interested in what people are interested in from a reading standpoint, just for Books for Guys purposes. I always ask, what's a book or two that has meant a lot to you personally or professionally? And then when asked, what's a good book that you like to recommend to other people?
Sure, sure. There's a bunch of them. Let me probably start with the one I've given to more people than any other book, and it's called Bad Science, and it's by a guy named Ben Goldacre. And it really is a good book for helping organize and clarify your thinking when you see something presented as science. And you start thinking, is that really true? And you dig into it a little more. So I liked that a lot. Then, gosh, several years ago, a buddy of mine recommended this book,
Deep
Deep
Sur-
Survival: Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. And it's by a guy named Lawrence Gonzalez. And it's it's fascinating. He looks at people that are side by side in survival situations, and one of them will perish and another one will thrive. And it ends up, it's not physical fitness or what you had for breakfast or anything else. It's mindset. And so he's got that book. He's got another one out called Surviving Survival, which talks a little bit more about that mindset and getting beyond traumatic things. Honestly, one that I think every man on the planet should read is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Mm,
And he's one of the fathers of the philosophy of Stoicism. And
love that.
he never wrote it. This is his diary. He wrote it to himself. And a lot of good quotes to take away from it, like stop thinking about being a good man and be one.
Mm.
So a lot of good stuff there. And then there's another one. I don't remember who wrote it, but it's called, looking at my bookshelf there, it's called Fooled by Randomness. And it's a little bit about thinking statistically, in that often things happen that are just random. And how do you tell if it's random or if it's a sign of a trend or something that you ought to be paying attention to? So those probably be my biggies.
Yeah. Man, those are good. I'm gonna add all of those. Yeah, you got another one?
I got one more.
Yeah.
I would be remiss because I gave this book to both my sons-in-law, Tim Ferriss, and the book Tools and Tips of Titans. He's got a lot of great stuff out there, but what I like about this book is that he's pulling the nuggets out from all of the conversations he's had with people that have been highly successful in a vast variety of endeavors. So yeah, that would be the last one, I promise.
No, you could give me recommendations all day. I love all of your recommendations. Number one, I haven't read any of them. I've heard of a couple of them, but I'm also a big fan of the books you recommended because I don't know why, but lately I've been really challenging myself and others to read more literature that leads to critical thinking and really maybe changing your perspective on something or just challenging yourself to say like, hey, I don't know enough about this, let me dig in a little bit deeper. But I don't know, I've gotten really into this trend where I'm seeing so many people just catch a short clip and all of a sudden their opinion is this, and I'm like, yeah, like dig deeper. That's probably not the whole story. And then someone gave me this quote the other day, and it was like, "Believe nothing of what you hear, and only half of what you see," just because of the perspective of things. And so, I love books that challenge and really make you think, and then you can really formulate your opinion and your thoughts once you dig in a little bit deeper. So, I love all those book recommendations because I feel like all of them kind of challenge you to think and see things in different ways and open up like that. So I'm adding all of those to my reading list and I'll probably crush them over the next month or two because
Right.
in that zone right now. So great recommendations. Yeah. But Pat, man, this has been man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And like I said, by the time this episode is out, all of your work will be on the Books for Guys website. So if anyone's interested, they can go find you. And obviously, we'll include links and everything so everyone can go purchase the book and support you. And obviously, your future work, now that we know that you've got some projects you're working on, we will get those as well. And then we're going to have you back on the podcast because you've got different books coming out, especially, the nonfiction route too. I would love to talk with you about that when it comes out and learn more about that story and share that. And so I'm looking forward to having you as a future guest as well, Pat.
Hey, happy to do that. I've had a blast.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
lot of
thank you,
fun.
man. I appreciate it.
All right.